Hi, this is Craig Berger, Chair of CDP and advisor on this class, and I'm doing a little tutorial on rendering. Whether you're deciding to render on this project or not, it's relatively easy. We have Podium rendering software on the computer in the labs. Twinmotion is available through LeoStream, or you can download it for free. You could also download Podium for 30 days for free on your laptop, very easy to use. So I'm going to go over a few different things for Podium and Twinmotion so you can get a feel for them in more specific detail. They're very easy software to use on the projects. And so to go through a few things. So just to go through each thing, let's get started. What you want to be thinking about doing is two types of rendering. You want to render in space, and then you want to bring that into Photoshop and cut them out, and then drop them into a photograph or another file. So when you're rendering a Podium and you are going to be using it in a space or something else, make sure you use it as a PNG file. There's three popular approaches to using Podium. The first one is very preliminary, which is to use daylight conditions or evening conditions with spot or omnilights using what's called HDRI. HDRI is a system where Podium has a series of backgrounds for you to use. I use this approach personally more than any other approach. Why? Because it's the easiest, and I like to do the easiest things on these projects. The second one, which is good, and we'll talk about this, is called the box. And the box is to use what are called LEMs, or light emitting materials, to create lighting conditions in combination with spot or omnilights. Basically, you're creating an illuminated box of which you put your object into, and this allows for tight control of lighting and conditions. The third is one that I don't particularly like using a lot because it takes a lot more time, but it does produce a certain level of effect. So I'll go into it if you're interested in using it, especially for a simple model. And it's called the Omnilight grid. And that's using a grid of lights to light the space. No matter what approach you do, I believe you should always go into Photoshop for post-production. I will not do post-production as part of this presentation, but I do believe you should always adjust your work in Photoshop before you put it in, and definitely add people and elements overall. Just to go into a few things about lights, just a few things to know about Podium to start. First big one, pictures do not read in Podium. Okay, that means that you have to do everything as a texture. So if you bring a picture in, just don't bring it as a picture, bring it in as a texture, import as a texture first. Daylight is very bright and washed out on Podium. So it's always good to try your tools under darker conditions, slightly darker conditions, to read better. And then experiment with daylight tools, including using shadows as well, and stuff like that, and as part of that work as well. So let's just get started with the first model. That is the use of the HDR piece as well. So what you want to do on the object is you want to get to know a little bit about how to create and save your programs. So here's a model on SU Podium. This is the little screw. When you type that on, you get the options for your output, your environment, or HDR IBEL. So what this goes is into the size. Now, whenever you're experimenting, always go at a very small size. So you could experiment on it, and then when you locked in what you like, then export it again at a much larger size. You could do an image format. There's three formats. One is PNG, one is JPEG, and one is HDR. PNG allows for transparent files, and HDR gives you the light background. And as I mentioned before, I've been intending to make it easy to use the HBR model and then put it into Photoshop, cut it out, and use that model as well. So this is the options area. So the HDR creates sky conditions that you can remove in Photoshop, and you can make the sky darker and brighter. And I will show you this in a second to do it. So what you would do usually is start with a low resolution file. The HDR gives you a lot of options. And then if you want to do something dark but add light, you could always add omnolights or sunsets for what you're doing. So let me show you this right now. I'll stop my share. And then I will switch to share again. And I'll bring up SketchUp. All right, we'll have the screen here. As you see, there's the podium toolbar as you go along. Here's the settings. Okay. And you could see we picked the smallest setting, or the second smallest setting. That allows us to quickly render and bring our views in. And of course, we could always switch to later when we lock in our view. So I have here the HDR file format. I type on HDR and you get to see sunset. And you could change the exposure to very light or very dark. So if you want to make dark conditions, you don't make it like this, that's black, you do it more like that in a little darker sense at a certain level. Then you could then add your additional lights. So let's say I add a spotlight. I can add the spotlight, the inner cone and the outer cone. So I could create that. I could start the spotlight right here. Click twice. You see where the line moves, it goes to the spotlight distance. So you can see I'll move it to the edge of this object right here. And that creates that spotlight. And you see it becomes an object. You see that object there. Put the objects on a separate layer or else you'll lose track of the object. You'll never see it again because they're very tiny. As you see, I've missed it. So let me try that again. Click, click, there, and there is the spotlight. Okay, so I have a spotlight right there. So when I render this, clicking this render button, there it goes. It will go very fast if it's small size. In the folder. Well, not as fast as you'd like it to be. It's still working. But okay, you see the point. Why don't we keep going as we go along on the presentation? So let's go back to the presentation again. And remember, when you're working in your light patterns, whenever you're bringing in materials or textures, always bring them in as textures. So you go into the create material. You could use a texture image and import a texture image through here, and then bring your textures into the model to be read. All right, so type object number 2, the box. Well, let me look again at my SketchUp model to see how we're doing. In the meantime, as we go into the, sorry, I'll bring it in. All right, so it looks like the model finished. Let me open it up. All right, now you see the model. So you see the spotlight, the darkish scene in the back that you could cut out. You see the little spotlight there, and you see it projecting light in this direction. And that allows you to move light in the directions you want to move in it. All right, I think we all understand that. Let's go back. So, so you see the box. So essentially, when we create the box, what we're doing is we put our entire object that we're rendering in the box, and then we give the box a material value called LEM, or light emitting material. That makes the material of the box glow. So you could see that right here, LEM. Now, the way you do it is you have to go in the model, pick a color that you see on the right side, and then click on that material color and give that the LEM value and apply it to that material. That material then will always have the LEM color, and then you would then paint the walls that color and that material as part of the project. You know, so to be able to do that, you would then be able to go into your box form and then be able to edit your work, in Podium. Obviously, after you've created the object, you then can go into edit and then edit the file and save it. And then you will be able then to cut it out in Photoshop and put it into a scene, just like you see here. As I said, adding Omnilights for interior, exterior elements can highlight areas with more detail. But then you could always go into Photoshop and be able to be able to add elements in more detail. So here's where I am in Photoshop, and you could see that I was able to add particular elements overall, like the person in shadow or a cone of light, like you see on the far left side, by using the Gaussian blur. And in that way, I could play up certain areas. I always put things in Photoshop at the end to get my picture across and everything. As I said before, all these pictures you see are textures. You have to make sure you're putting everything in as a texture. So that's what I like to do, is I like to always experiment with LEM and light emitting materials, spotlighting, reflection, and just making sure that it all kind of fits together into a project approach or a project idea. You know, you could also experiment with different ways of doing LEMs to create scenes. Like I see here, you see that big panel at the top is a light emitting material, and I was able to bring that into just the scene alone, where I didn't need a lot. You know, it was kind of like a nighttime view or a relatively night view, so I was able to get specific effects based on how that LEM module worked on that project. You can see I combined it with these spotlights that you see on the inside of the project here. Another project where we experimented with LEMs. And then, of course, you could start dropping it into your models. All projects we did with students. So the last one is the Omnilight grid. That's using a grid of Omnilights to light the space. So Omnilights are the most complex lights and produce the most depth. So Omnilights create a lot of reflections and going into it. When you use a grid of Omnilights, you can evenly distribute light in a similar way to a stage set. And you can combine Omnilights and spotlights. It really works well for interior spaces. It does have one big problem, and that it takes more time to use. So it's a really good approach, but if you have if you want to go a little quicker, I would tend to use the box or the spaces. LEMs take a lot less time than Omnilights because Omnilights are much more complex. So here's an example of creating a grid. So you start by creating a grid above your object, and then you attach Omnilights to that grid. And by attaching Omnilights to that grid, you then evenly distribute the lights. Now, obviously, if you're going to do this, you should put the whole thing inside of a dark box or do an evening view in your Podium view, a dark evening view in your Podium view for it to work successfully. And then, of course, you could add in Photoshop cones and people and all sorts of stuff. Finally, let's talk a little bit about Twinmotion. Twinmotion is probably the most popular software rendering tool we've been using. Why is that? Because it's free and it's easy to use, very easy to use, as you'll see when I show it to you. So I'll go over how Twinmotion works. Twinmotion is what's called a real-time renderer. So Twinmotion is very similar to Enscape or Lumion. There's a lot of them out there now. And basically, they render it while you're looking at it. So it's like what you see is what you get. And then you could adjust things in real time. It takes a lot more memory than Podium, but it's a lot more fun to use. And it really comes out of the animation and video industry. I'm only going to be focusing on still images here, but you can do animation in Twinmotion too. And that's for another day. So just here's the thing on how Twinmotion works. Is basically you are dropping your object in from SketchUp or another software program, and then you could add all kinds of elements to it, like rain or weather or people or objects as part of what to do. So let me show you how that works as part of this project as well. All right, so there you go. Here's a Twinmotion object. So you could see over here at the beginning, you could see the object that I placed in Twinmotion. And you could place any object in that you want to place in. An issue with Twinmotion, it freezes up a lot. As I see it's happening here. So let me close out of Twinmotion and reopen it again. All right, we fixed some of our issues with the computer. And so you see, looking at this is the Twinmotion grid. And there's usually a city in the background as part of the piece. This is a SketchUp model of a bookshelf that he imported in, and you could always move that bookshelf up and down in the model as part of your overarching project. And bring it down and move those things around. So what you would be able to do is you'd go into your model and then you could walk around your space. I won't go into the details about how that works, but you can go back and forth, up and down, left and right. All right, you can see how it all works on that scene. Okay, you can change the weather by adding rain and snow. If you want it to be more winter-like, you get the picture. You can come in and you could add vegetation. You could add different objects and people. It's a lot of fun. You know, you could add Agnes, drop in Agnes in there, and Agnes can dance a jig as part of your overall project. So you can bring people in, you can make the people move, you can do a lot of things. Okay, so easy enough to render. You created these nice situations, and now I want to render. So you could make a movie, You can make a picture. So if you want to make a rendered movie, you go to image. And then you pick an image. If you create an image, you create the image of the scene that you see there, and you can always keep adjusting it even again to make what you want. Then if you want to render that image, you just click on image 3 and then start export. There you go. So coming back again, here I just opened up the file and you can see it's been rendered and it renders the element. So that's really how that works, the real-time render tool. And as I said, Lumion and Enscape are also real-time render tools that work pretty effectively. So just to finish up, these tools are available. Podium is available in our computer labs. Twinmotion is free, and you could use them on the remote servers. And I would think that you should spend some time experimenting and trying them out. Not very difficult to use, and they're a lot of fun. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye-bye.